Another form of endocytosis is the most interesting one, receptor-mediated endocytosis. Receptor-mediated endocytosis. And receptor-mediated, so that means we have a receptor, in fact a specific receptor. So that means if we have a receptor, we should have also a specific ligand, a ligand that binds onto a receptor. So let's imagine we are having, that is our receptor, then we should have a ligand. So if this is my receptor, then the ligand that binds to that specific receptor. So this is receptor-mediated endocytosis. We'll have a receptor, a ligand binding to a receptor, then endocytosis takes place. And we say the endocytosis, endo means inside. So we are transporting something, a substance inside the cell. But now here we have a specific receptor. So in this case, things like hormones can be transported using these specific receptors. Then we can have cholesterol also being transported. Here for us we'll have emphasis, we'll look at the low density lipoproteins. So we'll have at the LDL receptor, we'll look at the LDL receptor. And these receptors are located in the liver. So for us, we'll basically concentrate on the LDL receptors located in the liver cells. Remember, LDL, all of these lipoproteins, are insoluble. They are not water soluble, so they are more hydrophobic. So if we want them to, remember, if we have them excess in the body, they are dangerous to our body. So we need a receptor that can transport them into the cell such that they are broken down to a form that is less dangerous within the body, such that they are metabolized, in other words. So, but let's look at the process in detail, what happens in receptor-mediated endocytosis, like what basically happens. But again, receptor-mediated endocytosis, before we go far, it is an important scenario. It is very important within the body, but it can also be dangerous in the body. It can be harmful within the body. Why? Because if we have the receptors, such receptors hijacked, if such receptors are hijacked by let's say viruses, let's say we have the HIV virus hijacking the CD4 receptor. It can lead to HIV stroke AIDS in certain patients. If we have the influenza virus hijacking the receptor, the specific receptors, it can lead to flu within our patients. So such receptors can be important, but can also be hijacked by the drivers of diseases and poor health in humans. So we are going to have a look at receptor-mediated endocytosis in detail. So we'll start with the receptor. We agreed that we use the LDL, low density lipoproteins. These are low density lipoproteins. If we have these in the liver, and in the liver, let's say we are having LDL receptors, cells containing the LDL receptors. So they should be specific receptors, the LDL receptors, within the liver cells. So this is what will happen. Let me just sketch a cell. Let's say we are having a cell, and this cell has the LDL receptors. LDL receptors. Then let's say that, so this is LDL receptor. That means our ligand is now LDL. All these are receptors, then LDL comes. So this is LDL, the low density lipoprotein. So LDL, low density lipoprotein, and LDL receptors. So when the ligand if the ligand attaches onto that specific receptor, inside the cell, inside the membrane of the cell, clathrine will coat there. So we have clathrine coating. Clathrine, we have a protein called clathrine. So clathrine will coat. When clathrine coats, so we have LDL initially attaching to the LDL receptor, then clathrine comes and coats. It's a protein that will coat onto the inner membrane of the cell when the LDL is in contact with the LDL receptor. So clathrine coats onto the inner surface of that. Then we'll have the invagination of this membrane. So let's say this is step 1. What happens? In fact, step 1 is binding. Then step 2, clathrine comes and coats onto the inner membrane. Then when it coats onto the inner membrane, let's imagine the membrane is invaginating. So we have this coating. The clathrine coat is there, is on top there. Let me also the clathrine there. So the clathrine is there, but again we have these guys, the receptors, and their LDL bound to them. So the invagination happens. When the invagination happens, of course, later on we'll have detaching from the membrane. When it detaches, we expect to form something. So let me just shift that. When it detaches, we'll form a vesicle, which is like that, with clathrine on top. A clathrine coated, we'll have the one which is clathrine coated. So clathrine coating on top. Then inside we are having the LDL with the receptors. LDL with the receptor. So we are having a clathrine coated vesicle here. So after us getting a vesicle which is clathrine coated, clathrine will disappear. So clathrine disappears. If this is step 3, let's imagine this is step 4. Then later on, clathrine disappears. So we have our vesicle currently like that, without the clathrine. Vesicle like without clathrine. So that is our vesicle. So after obtaining a vesicle, which is without clathrine, protons, hydrogen ions, will be pumped. So we'll have excess of hydrogen ions pumped into this vesicle. So when hydrogen ions are pumped to the vesicle, pumped to the vesicle, what happens is that the hydrogen ions entering into the vesicle, they will lower the pH to about in average of around a pH of around 5. So the pH is becoming acidic. What this acidic pH does is that it will weaken the acidic pH, which acidic pH weakens the bond. It will weaken the bond between the receptor, between the LDL receptors and the LDL, between the receptors and the LDL. That means inside there, this is what happens next now. So if that is 4, then this is 5. Let's imagine this is 6. Let's assume this is 6. Now this is what we are having. 5, we are having our receptors inside there. But now the bond with LDL is weakened. So we are having a separation which is like that in 6. And this is due to lowering the pH within the vesicle. So when the pH lowers, in fact this vesicle is what is referred to as the endosome. So our vesicle is referred to as the endosome. So inside the endosome, lowering of pH weakens the bond between these two, and they will separate. So when they separate, when they separate, we'll have recycling of the receptors. So this is what will happen. We'll have a vesicle containing the receptors. Now we'll retrieve the receptors, and we'll have another vesicle containing the LDL. So these are receptors, recycled. So there is recycling of our receptors, which will later on, they will go back to the cell membrane. Let's assume that is our cell membrane. The receptors will go back to the cell membrane, and then the LDL, this side, this vesicle that contains LDL, will fuse with the lysosome. So this vesicle containing LDL will fuse with the lysosome. So plus lysosome, the lysosome will break down the LDL inside there, and finally will form a secondary. So there will form a secondary lysosome, and the LDL will be metabolized by the enzymes within the lysosome. So this is what basically happens in receptor-mediated endocytosis. So receptor-mediated endocytosis, we said we need a specific receptor, and we need ligands that are specific for the receptor. So a ligand, let's say we are having LDL, that is low density lipoprotein, attaching onto the LDL receptor, low density lipoprotein receptor, and when it attaches, clathrin will coat the inner membrane. So the covering of clathrin, after clathrin coating the inner membrane, there will be an invagination, formation of a pouch, later detaching of the vesicle from the cell membrane. When the vesicle detaches, we'll have it covered with clathrin initially, and the inside containing the receptors and the LDL. But later on, we see the pH, the clathrin disappears, we see the pH lowering, and when the pH lowers, inside the endosome, when hydrogen ions are pumped inside the endosome, pH lowers, the bond weakens between the LDL and its receptors, and after that, we'll form receptors that are detached from the LDL. Then finally, we'll have recycling of our receptors, and we'll retrieve the LDL, which LDL will later be broken down by the lysosomes or metabolized by the lysosomes. But why is this so important? Because in this case, we are trying to reduce levels of LDL in the body. So we are trying to metabolize LDL. This LDL, basically we are trying to metabolize cholesterol in the body. So if this doesn't happen, you'll find that people who have a mutation of the receptors, where the LDL receptors are not working effectively, they will develop a condition called familial condition. The condition is familial hypercholesterolemia. So they will develop familial hypercholesterolemia. And with familial hypercholesterolemia, now here someone has excess of the cholesterol within their blood. And we know if you have excess of cholesterol within your blood, it can develop into stroke. So you will find people developing stroke, people having heart attacks, then stroke, then some people might develop myocardial infarctions in the heart. So that is why it is very important for us to have the receptor-mediated endocytosis, specifically the one for the LDL transport, or else heart diseases might come in. And we know that when this cholesterol accumulates in their blood vessels, it might block the blood vessels, most of the coronary arteries of the heart, and the heart muscle might not receive blood to work effectively. So that is why these receptors are very important. But however, they can be hijacked by viruses like the HIV virus and lead to the cause of diseases in humans. So that is it for our receptor-mediated endocytosis and vesicular transport in summary. So exocytosis, endocytosis, then exo we said moving out of the cell, endo into the cell, which endo is divided into cell drinking, endocytosis, cell eating, phagocytosis, and receptor mediated endocytosis.